and this speaks, the question that I have, and to the K-12 question, but as well as county commission later on, because we've heard that there's so many mandates, unfunded mandates that come out of either the federal government or the state government, that local governments, whether it's the county or a township or the schools, have to abide by. And they're not given additional funding for that. So my question is twofold. How many laws are written and passed each year that add to an ever burgeoning codified law in South Dakota? When you look at the statutes in South Dakota, is anything ever cleared out? How do we go about taking away the burden, the regulatory burden, the financial burden? That's the answer that I think that we need to look at, instead of creating more laws, more regulations, more. What can we do to create less? Maybe like Mike said, keep it simple. Let's get back to where it's manageable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. That's a loaded question. So I've heard the unfunded mandates. I understand that piece. But you realize some of those things you can take away. I mean, you can discontinue I sat on interim rules for 24 years. So every time a new law comes into place, then the agency has to create policies or rules how to implement that law. That adds costs. Now, there's also the intent that when there's bills out there, there's a question of asked, what's it going to cost to implement this bill? And so you get a fiscal statement of what it's going to be on the cost for the state of South Dakota. So sometimes those things are done. On the unfunded mandates, those that have to stay on, if the county's not going to absorb them, you know where they're going to go. Then it'll go to the state. So if it goes to the state, then the question will be, well, where are you going to get the money for that? Is from the general fund? Are you going to have to raise taxes? It's really a cost shifting that you're going to do. I know there's a lot of discussion, and there could be a summer study that looks at these unfunded mandates and goes through sections. I'll tell you the other thing. South Dakota is tough on crime, okay? Every one of those criminal proceedings that goes on, there's mandates that go with it as to what we are doing. You know, we've tried to provide some relief for the counties where we've now have prosecutors that are taking some of those more costly cases for the county, so we're doing some things. The other thing is we did fund cybersecurity at a tune of $7 million for the state. I understand it's not all expended. I have to quit.
Whew, where do I start? My head is spinning here. Yeah, unfunded mandates, and that's one of the things when I'm reelected as state senator to really look at, because my thought is if the state thinks it's that important, either fund it themselves or provide the money to do it. And I think there's a lot of things. I've been in talks with the county commission to say, you know, what are some things that do we really need it? But also, too, looking at how can we have our counties be able to share resources. And again, I go back to buying asphalt by our county road people, and counties coming to get together to be able to, you know, get a cheaper bid. And so the other thing, too, that this brings to mind I want to go to, because I had a bill that got popped on this, is the fact that when you want to do something as a state, but if you do it, you'll lose your federal money. That happened this year. I had superintendents who wanted to have a little flexibility in their juniors testing. You know, every junior has to take the ACT now. And so I brought a bill, said, hey, you know, let's give the superintendents, the school boards, a little flexibility. Guess what? We can't do it. Why? You'll lose federal money. And so that's the other thing you have to remember and think about, too, is the fact that we have a lot of things going on in our state that maybe it's like, geez, do we really want it? Do we really need it? But again, if we don't do it, we're dictated by the federal government and we'll lose that money. And so there's a lot of things going on. But again, going back to those unfunded mandates, we really need to look at those and say, are they really needed?
So I think the unfunded mandate thing's been addressed. One thing you said, Sandy, was codified law. So I was fishing one night and I had a sheriff show up and say, you have to leave along the Jim River. You're trespassing. Didn't argue, just left. Well, then I got thinking about it. So I looked up the codified law. Well, the Corps of Engineers has a high water mark. You are not trespassing as long as you are beneath that high water mark, and we did not cross private property to reach this. So I thought, well, we weren't trespassing. And then it said, see codified law, whatever. So I went and looked at that, and believe it or not, that law contradicted the one I had just read. So then what do you do? So yes, that needs addressed big time, because I am sure there's so many duplicate laws out there or contradicting laws. It's kind of like your doctor prescribing you meds and one's canceling the other. How we go about doing that, I do not know, but I'd sure like to find out. Thank you.
Thank you also for that question, because as a county commissioner, I know all of the unfunded mandates, and I can't say that they're unfunded because they're funded by the property taxes. So it's not really unfunded, but there are mandates by the state of South Dakota, the legislature, that need to be looked at. Last year, Yankton County spent over $500,000 for court-appointed attorneys. Now, and the state of South Dakota is really the only state in the union that enforces that rule. Also, juvenile detention, delinquency, and things like that. So my plan is to go to Peer and say, hey guys, I know you don't have all the funding to take over the $500,000 for court-appointed attorneys, but let's come up with a solution and reimburse Yankton County and other counties a percentage or something to help the counties. Because if you take 10% of $500,000, $200,000 for delinquency, you round those numbers up, you get $1 million. You take 10% of that's $100,000. That's gonna help reinforce some roads and bridges and things like that, or will generate an avenue to reduce property taxes. Which every time we reduce our expenses, that calculation reduces property taxes.
I'm going to address it in 3 different ways. First of all, in the first couple of days of the legislative session, each one of the different areas in the legislature, the different committees and the departments bring bills to eliminate things that you were talking about, Mike, as far as bills that are either not necessary or whatever they might be. But, you know, to get to the heart of the things is really this, you know, people make it complicated. And that's why we have to mend some of the laws. And let me just go back to this. Remember, there's this old man with a beard. His name was Moses. And he decided that all we needed was 10 laws, right? Well, that didn't work out so well because then we had Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, right? And that's kind of the way it is in society from that kind of a standpoint. One of the things that I think we've seen a change in that I think Hope deals with some unfunded mandates, but really deal with funding, and that is we're starting to see a change in the legislature where more and more opportunity is given to local control to determine whether or not we want to do something or not. When I first on the Yankton School Board, you know, each school district would come to the taxpayers and say, this is the amount of money that we need for taxes to educate our kids, and then that's when the taxes would be determined. We're starting to see some legislation that gives that type of authority not only to the counties but also to the municipalities.